Okay, very excited to be here. I just flew in from the US late yesterday night, so I'm a little groggy, which may not be a bad idea. Okay, so we're in an era of unprecedented velocity of technology disruption, change, and that's really fascinating. And over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity of seeing it from different lenses, in Fidelity, where I was the CEO for India, but also heading the strategy and transformation for Fidelity's international business. So I saw it very closely in a very large, very successful global enterprise. The last couple of years, as the Chief Operating Officer of Flipkart, saw it in a digital native, driving the process. And over the last year, as the CEO of Incido, where we are serving mostly Fortune 100 companies on emerging technologies, their digital transformation. And it's very interesting, I want to share with you, what I've learned over the last 6-7 years in this journey. I think the bottom line is that, the technology advancements have far overrun the advancement in our management and organizational thinking and approaches. Has far overrun. And Meenakshi, I think you set it up very nicely. It's not really about digital transformation, but business transformation. Because I really think that right now, the bottleneck is all of us. Bottleneck is all of us in this room. It is really our leadership thinking, our leadership capabilities, our organization structures, which are limiting the large enterprises from realizing the full potential of digital technologies. Yeah? So today, I would like to share with you my thinking on what is really different. What is really different about digital? And Meenakshi shared some rules. I have my 8 rules. I have my 8 rules on what you may want to do differently. Okay. Busy slides. But there are 6, as I think about digital, there are really 6 things which I think are very different, and which is why large enterprises end up struggling. The customer is different. The customer is younger. The customer has a lot more price visibility, has a lot more price transparency because of digital, and therefore is a lot more demanding. And so the customer has a lot more choice, a very, very demanding customer. Data. There is an unprecedented explosion of data in every possible way. The volume, variety, and velocity of data is humongous, is exploding beyond what we can handle. That's a phenomenal opportunity. That's a great opportunity to understand our customers very deeply, to personalize the customer journeys. It's also like quicksand. You can really kind of fall into that quicksand of trying to manage your data, because it can become, if you are not careful about it, it can become one of those impossible problems to solve. Yeah? So this explosion of data. Very fast changing, very fast velocity of technology change. Even if you just look over the last 5-6 years, a couple of years back, we were talking about cloud, digital, mobile, blah, blah, blah. We hardly talk about it because that's become mainstream. We are now talking about AI and machine learning, IoT, blockchain. I'm sure even in 2 years, that will become kind of just part of our normal lexicon. But it's not just about the velocity of technology change. New players are continuously emerging, and industry structures are changing. Who you are competing with is probably not even there. And there is a new type of player, which is not really competing with you. When I was at Fidelity, suddenly Alipay in China became our biggest competitor. Yeah? In 1 or 2 years, they just overran the payments industry in China. So who your competitor is can change very, very quickly. Technology driven, and Meenakshi again touched upon it. Business is now technology. The role of technology is changing from being a support to an enabler to actually driving the business. But organizations are not yet ready for it. They're not yet ready for it. Technology is also probably not yet ready to take on that leadership role. Because historically, the positioning of technology within the organization and what it should now be, there is a very big gap in that. There's a very big gap in that. So clearly, business is not technology driven, but are the organizations ready to absorb that? Not yet. Iterative. Digital is very iterative. There is nothing right first time does not exist. Right first time does not exist. It is very experimentation and learning driven. You do something, you learn, you do A/B testing, and then you kind of refine and you do it again. And a lot of our execution approaches, and as technologists, we love big bang. We love big bang, we love doing big projects. That actually in digital doesn't work. It can actually be a problem. It can be a problem. So this is very iterative. You do not, right first time doesn't work. And finally, it is cross-functional or interdisciplinary. Most of the problems you have in digital, this is finally a business problem, and it is no one function can solve those problems alone. And that is where I feel the legacy enterprises really struggle because of our size. We are structured as kind of well-defined departments or functions, whereas the problem to be solved is not structured like that. Yeah, it needs a more cross-functional team approach, and that is where we tend to struggle. So these, to my mind, are 6 key kind of differences. As you think about our traditional work, and as you think about new technologies and digital, these are the 6 fundamental drivers. Now, what is happening because of this? Because of the digital impact, it's kind of creating like a bimodal distribution, a bimodal distribution. There are many companies who are, and industries, that have struggled, that are struggling to survive. Of course, Eastman Kodak, everybody knows. Retail, an industry I've seen disintegrate in front of my eyes. And it's really, it's really just unbelievable. Companies like Sears and even Walmart, who were always the case studies, and really, really struggling. It's something quite unbelievable. BlackBerry, was a technology pioneer, Nokia. But at the same time, the winners are winning really, really big. And if you look at the Google, Facebook duopoly on the online advertising market, 99% of incremental advertising growth is being captured by these 2 players. It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable because when you win, you win really, really big. Amazon and Alibaba, we talk too much about Amazon. I find Alibaba to be an even more impressive story. What these 2 players are doing to retail, I think is unprecedented. Microsoft is not exactly a digital native. And it's a company which for many years struggled. But over the last couple of years under Satya's leadership, they have really turned the ship. It's I think, an incredible turnaround story. And I was talking to the CEO of Microsoft India, and he was telling me how Satya has changed the culture from knowing everything, know-it-all company to a learn-it-all company. So it's not just the digital natives. Even large legacy enterprises, when they get the game right, can win very, very big. But it's not easy. It's not easy at all. I look at Fortune 100 companies across the sectors I work in, financial services, telecom, life sciences, healthcare, and generally I see companies struggling. Everybody is doing digital. Everybody is implementing all these technologies. Everybody is shifting budget from more core IT to kind of new IT, business IT. But are they really seeing their business outcomes change? Are the business KPIs really changing? Answer, I think, is no. There is a big gap between the promise and the reality. So clearly, for me, that's the bottleneck. We need new rules of management to really win in this era of digital disruption. That is the bottleneck. That is what needs focus, yeah? And that is what will help us really realize or minimize this gap between potential and reality. Okay, what are these? So I have 8 rules. May sound like a lot. We'll go through them quickly. The first is about innovation, innovating and shaping the future. You know, Steve Jobs famously said that those who are crazy enough to believe they can change the world are the ones who actually do so. I think this is more true now than ever. Yeah, more true now than ever. You know, historically, the way we have looked at our business, what we do is that we look at what is last year or the last couple of years and then kind of do more or different from that. This whole concept of baseline is actually just going. Because I see again business opportunities in that bimodal distribution. I love that bimodal distribution because I think that's what the world is now. Either you have businesses where growth has just come down. The growth has been throttled. Yeah, you look at the IT services industry. The IT services industry, where we were working at like 25-30% growth. I remember a couple of years back, I led a NASSCOM year-end session and we said, oh, the growth is now 14-15%. Oh no, it's like a disaster. And now the growth is 7-8%. Yeah? So either your growth is really throttling down or you have new areas like IoT or blockchain or automation, where the growth is 60-70%. Yeah? So in either case, the baseline doesn't matter. The baseline doesn't matter. You have to create the growth. You have to create that industry. In Flipkart, we saw that. There is only 2 categories, mobile phones and fashion, where the internet penetration or the e-commerce penetration is relevant. In all other categories, it's less than 1%. It's less than 1%. What kind of planning do you do if that is a penetration? It makes no sense. So the way you think about your future is by innovating and shaping the industry. Yeah? And when you innovate and when you look to shape, what happens is that you will often end up cannibalizing yourself. You will often end up cannibalizing yourself. And that is the innovator's dilemma. That is the innovator's dilemma, and that is what typically limits us from taking those big steps. And I think that's the shift, that's the big switch that is needed. Don't worry about cannibalization. It's best that you cannibalize yourself. Because if you don't, somebody else will. Yeah? So that's my big message. Message number 1, you have to innovate. There is no other way. You have to shape the future, and for that, you may need to cannibalize yourself. Rule number 2 is about strategy. And I love strategy. I have done strategy for 25 years, 14 years in McKinsey. Fidelity, I headed strategy. Flipkart, I headed strategy. But I have tough news for anybody who does strategy here. I think strategy is now mostly irrelevant. Strategy is now mostly irrelevant. My experience that in this fast-changing world, strategy does not survive that touch contact with reality. The world is changing just way too quickly. Strategy is not the North Star. Strategy, in fact, can be limiting. Yeah? You do need to have clarity on your purpose. You can call it the purpose, your mission, your long-term goal, what you're trying to do. I think that is important. That is important because that kind of gives you a sense of where you want to go. But strategic plans, 3-5-year plans, in my experience, have become limiting. What I would advocate is a very agile approach to strategy, lighter strategy with a shorter time frame. I believe that the classical strategy to execution life cycle, where you define strategy, have plans, then execute, actually has to be spun on its head. I believe that it's execution. Execution is king. You execute, and then some things work, some things don't work. Yeah? And then you connect the dots from what works, and that becomes your strategy. Yeah? I think it's a very important point and probably needs a longer discussion, but I think it's very important. I think it's very important. The classical strategy life cycle needs to be changed. It needs to become a lot more iterative, a lot more execution driven, and connecting the dots is super critical. Customers. Of course, customer is king, and that's been the foundation of business ever since business started. What is different? What is different? Let me take a couple of ideas both for enterprise and from a customer perspective, from a consumer perspective, B2C perspective. From an enterprise perspective, I would suggest that the boundaries between being a customer and client, the client-customer traditional relationship, I see dissolving. Or you better dissolve them, yeah? Because the speed of change, the velocity of change is so high that if you're going through the traditional client service context, you will fail. You will fail to pick up all the changes, all the cues, yeah? You need a lot more of a partnership model, lot more of a co-create model, joint teams, joint working. I think that's the only way on the enterprise side that you can really serve your customers well. On the B2C side, the big thing is just data, and I talked about this earlier. And that explosion of data is really giving the massive opportunity for personalization. And the move from segmentation to personalization. Again, I have set up analytics for McKinsey, and then, I've been responsible for that, both Fidelity and Flipkart. Again, the role of analytics is totally changing. Analytics was based on doing segmentation. Segmentation is not that relevant anymore. Recently I was having a chat with head of analytics at one of the largest telecom companies in the world. And I asked him, how do you think about segmentation? And he said, we have 130 million segments now. They have 130 million customers and 130 million segments. So that's the thing. That's the thing that, personalization and personalizing the entire customer journey from when you acquire the customer and you nurse the customer across the life cycle is a humongous opportunity. Yeah? And it is about data to insights to action. Yeah? Data to insights to action. And this is where AI machine learning really is relevant. There is a lot of hullabaloo around AI and machine learning. Many of the use cases are still experimental, but this is the area impacting the customer journey, personalization, where machine learning really is making a big difference. So co-create with customers and personalize the customer journeys. Building a technology DNA, I already touched upon it. That technology is now the business. Technology is now the business, and what this really means is that the gap between business and technology need to work very closely together. But that is not the reality. That is not yet the reality in most enterprises that I see. There is still a big gap. It's a gap in terms of understanding, business understanding of technology, technology understanding of business. Technology believes they understand business, but it's more like general knowledge. It's more like general knowledge. It's still not that deep, where you can actually understand the customer pain points very deeply and come up with solutions. And business understands that, business feels they understand technology, but it's quite superficial. So there is a gap. There's also a gap of perception. There's also a gap of perception. Is this tech guy who was really responsible for our infrastructure and really, is he the person who now needs to be in the boardroom? There is a gap of perception. And that's something, I think it's a huge opportunity for the CIOs. It's a huge opportunity for the CIOs to step up and be the leaders of that change. But equally, if you do not, I think you'll be pushed out. You'll be pushed out, yeah? So I think that's a very big thing, and it's not an easy journey. It's not an easy journey because it's not just about building capabilities. It is about impacting the culture. Culture does not change in weeks or months. Culture takes years to change, and you have to be very, very persistent in driving that journey. It is also about your organizational structure and governance. Yeah, governance. What is the governance of your firm? Okay, simplify organization structure and processes. I think this is key. This is key. The fundamental premise on which organization structures and processes are defined is what? Anybody? What is the basic logic or the philosophy behind designing? Control, Jaideep, absolutely, control. It is risk management. It is risk mitigation. It is CYA. Yeah, it is that. Because nobody wants to have the risk stick to themselves, and they keep on adding layers and controls, layers and controls. And in a world where speed is king, you have to break that. You have to break that. So you need to apply the agile principles, speed over risk management, simplicity. Don't get it 100% right. Simplicity over perfection, empowerment over control. It just, this is, it just needs a total new rethink. Yeah, org design, flatter structures, generally horizontal structures over vertical structures. I think we have spent the last 10, 15 years having built vertical structures which address specific customer, industry needs specifically. But when those the industries you're operating in or the customers you're serving, if they are going to change quite rapidly, what's the point of having very specific structures? You need more flexible horizontal structures. Facilitating cross-functional collaboration. It's a big, big thing. I think a big difference between the digital natives, if you look at the success of Google and Facebook and Amazon versus the more legacy enterprises, I think this is a key. This is a key. How do you ensure cross-functional collaboration? The likes of Google have very successfully developed product managers who enable that cross-functional collaboration. How do you do that? How do you do that? Yeah, those are not program managers. They are truly integrators. Yeah, and simpler processes, fewer controls. So, and again, perfection can be the enemy of good here. So again, from Flipkart, among my various roles there, I also headed HR, and it was fascinating. So we really, we had this very, very elaborate performance management system. Yeah, because we were all very bright engineers. It was a perfectly designed process, which looked at inputs, outputs, took feedback from peers, customers, blah, 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 blah. The problem was that it became a gridlock. It used to take like 3 months to do. And given we used to do it twice a year, so basically, over the year, we did only 2 things as a company. Either we did our big $1 billion sale, yeah, or we did half-annual performance reviews. That's all we did. Yeah, and I think it was stupid. In hindsight, it was stupid. Because what is the outcome? So you need to have simpler, faster processes, and every process should really put customer and employee first. Yeah. Build a learning and knowledge sharing organization. Clearly, continuous learning is critical. That's the only way you can survive. And the good news is that technology has democratized access to knowledge. Technology has democratized access to knowledge. So L&D managers have a big problem because you don't need to create content internally because content is really available. Yeah. But in such a paradigm, the question also is that how do you differentiate on knowledge? If everybody has access to the same knowledge, then what's unique about you? And there, I would say that a lot of knowledge is still tacit knowledge. I headed McKinsey's Knowledge Center for 8 years and led McKinsey's Global Knowledge Network. So I can tell you that our estimate was that 70–80% of knowledge was in a place like McKinsey was tacit. Only 20–30% was codified. Yeah, and I think that's something important for you to reflect on that how do you codify your tacit knowledge and how do you create proprietary knowledge? What is the knowledge? 90% of knowledge may be democratized and available to everybody, but what is the 10% knowledge which is unique to you, which you can create? Build an open organization and a web of partnerships. Nobody, whether it is HP or whoever, yeah, nobody can do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. The velocity at which new technologies are getting created, new IP is getting created, new players are emerging and playing different roles in the ecosystem. Nobody. At Fidelity, we could not do it. At Flipkart, we could not do it. Yeah? Nobody can do it alone. So every company has to embrace the notion of partnering with the ecosystem and developing open innovation platforms. If you are large enough, create your own innovation platform, or you work with an existing innovation platform. I think there is no choice. You have to do it. Just trying to build a closed system, I think, is a kiss of death. And you need to have specialized capability for doing that. In both Fidelity and Flipkart, we had a corporate development team, a fairly sizable team, which was driving that. It has to be done on a professional basis. And the interesting thing is a competitor can become a partner very quickly, and a partner can become a competitor very quickly. So we are in an environment where the roles are shifting very, very, very rapidly. So you need to be tracking them very, very closely. And finally, culture and leaders. This is, I think, finally the key. This is finally the most important thing. Clearly, what got us here will not get us there. And the more successful we are, bigger is the problem. Because more successful we are, we have this touching faith, belief in our success formulas, and more difficult, and we find it more difficult to change. Number of things: decision making, balancing data and intuition. With so much data available, how do you use that for decision making? It's a skill. It's a skill. But at the same time, when there is so much, when you're inundated with data, how do you really bring in intuition? You need data to be as good, but you need intuition to bring that extra something. Speed of action under ambiguity. You have to move very, very fast. We have talked about it many times, speed is king. But things are hazy, things are less clear. Yeah? So speed of action under ambiguity. Audacity and intelligent risk-taking. Audacity was one of the core values at Flipkart, and I believe one of the key reasons for Flipkart's success. Audacity, really thinking big and risk-taking. Innovation and creativity, building a technology DNA, continuous learning and humility. Again, I would emphasize on humility. Because with success, there is a certain hubris that comes. And hubris is the kiss of death. Because that's when you stop listening, you think you know everything, and you stop learning, and that's when you will fail. Yeah. So how do you, in this fast-paced environment, how do you build that humility? How do you build that humility that will allow you to keep on listening and learning? Inspiring, less managing. Of course, you can't. We talked about the problems with control. You can't manage everything. There are too many variables. There are too many variables to control. You have to inspire. Humane, centered in chaos. It's a bit of an odd thing to be talking to in a technology conference, but I think it's very important. When the pace of change is so frenetic, so feverish, and you can just be, that speed and that vortex, can really suck you in. You need to be centered. You need to be centered in chaos to be effective. How will you do that? Personally for me, it's meditation. I've been doing meditation for 35 years, and I think that's what keeps me sane, or at least semi-sane. Everybody, may have a certain different way of doing it, but how do you retain that human touch and centered in chaos. I think that's a very big issue to kind of think about. Resilience and adaptability. Whoever you are, whether you are King Kong or whoever, in the digital world, you will certainly fail. You will certainly fail at least sometime. Yeah, it's such a probabilistic world. You will see failures. Given. That's the only surety. Yeah. And the key is that how do you bounce back? How do you bounce back? How do you adapt? That is the key. Winning is not the key. The key is that when you take the knocks as an organization or as an individual, as a leader in the organization, how do you bounce back? There are more thoughts, but these are just some thoughts for you to reflect on. Overall, just to kind of summarize, see, we've been talking about managers to leaders forever, ever. I feel now is the point when it's not just like a nice statement, but it is real. Managing duality, it's a complex concept. See, we are in a world where there are a lot of contradictory things. You have to chase growth, you have to chase profitability. Yeah, you have to have the long-term kind of vision, and you have to execute in the short term, long-term, short-term. You need to act with speed, but you need to be thoughtful. You need to work with data, but you need to have intuition. So at least my kind of big reflection is that you have to, it's not one thing. It's not one thing. And if you search for that one thing, you will fail. It is about managing duality. It is about managing different speeds at the same time. Yeah. So managing duality is, I think, one of the core underlying skills that leaders will need to develop. And finally, all of this will become real through role modeling. It is not anybody else. It's not some undefined HR or CEO or board that defines the culture. It is all of us. So it is all of us. How do we drive this change? So friends, this is what I wanted to share with you. These are the 8 rules. Innovate and shape the future. Be agile on strategy. Co-create with customers. Build a technology DNA. Simplify org structure and processes. Build a learning and knowledge sharing organization. Build an open organization, a web of partnerships, and foster an entrepreneur leaders and culture. And just to conclude, I think this is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for CIOs. It's a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous opportunity because technology is becoming business, business is becoming technology. You know it best. You know it best. And it is truly your time. Your time is now to really drive it. Thank you.